completing the 25th year.
Wherever you are in the world, you need to know how much it costs you to produce your product or deliver your service. You need to understand how those costs become the price that you set. You need to have a budget. You need to make decisions. And so that language of business, that language of cost, in a sense, that language of setting a price, that's universal. What's the shortcut? How can I, study in less time?
And we all know how significant a role you have played in, CMA's journey and its popularity and its credibility, all of that. So how do you see the US CMA certification shaping up in India and in other geographies also?
And is AI going to take all the accountants' jobs in the world? And the answer to that is no. It gives candidates the knowledge. You're not going to get a job because those tools are what are required to do the job.
CPA, and I don't know, the first thing they see, they take it up sometimes.
That when you start your career, and then after a few years, your career might start to take a certain direction. And if that direction is in accounting, if that direction is in finance, if that direction is in internal audit, there's a different certification that you need based on what direction your career is going. I'll give an example. There was the phrase, readers are leaders.
And I think that is an ability the current generation, and putting it on the wall is not, it's not an ATM machine, right? So how much money will I make?
Okay. So you need to show that you can do something. So if that first job you're offered is less than you wanted it to be, less than what your friend got at a different job, is a lot larger than the 20% of that salary you were making your first day on the job. What CMA provides here is that knowledge, this standardized certification. This is what this person knows.
Most of us would not even dream of. You are at the pinnacle, and yet you are driven. Yet you are doing so many activities that somebody in your position could very well rest on his laurels and say, okay, I've done it all. I don't need to do anything. So what pushes you and what's next for you? Well, hello. Good afternoon. And this is my first podcast, and that is not the most exciting part for me. The most exciting part, and a part that, as I said, adds to my nervousness, is that I'm going to be talking to a giant in this field, Mr. Brian Hock. Welcome to Plutus Education.
Thank you.
And it's not just welcome to Plutus Education, welcome to India. And let me take this opportunity to congratulate you for completing the 25th year.
Yes.
You started in Moscow in 2000, right?
Correct, yes.
And yes, that's what makes it 25 years. Look at me, how silly. And Hock has become the go-to material, the go-to publication, the go-to everything for students pursuing US CMA. And we feel so privileged and fortunate that we get to talk to you, to hear from you.
It's my pleasure. And I guess if you think about it, when I started 25 years ago, I probably wouldn't have guessed that 25 years later I'd be sitting here in India having a podcast talking about 25 years. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of hard work, but it's been a great fun, and it's an honor to be here today.
And if I will fall short of epithets if I start listing out your achievements and your many qualifications, there's CSCA, there's so much. So how has that been possible with so many responsibilities and creating this behemoth in publication and coaching? How has that been possible?
Well, I think I like to learn, and that's probably the flip side to teaching. And one of the things they say is that if you really want to understand, if you know something yourself, teach it. And it's through that process of teaching that you begin to learn really, really well yourself. And so for me, the different certifications I've earned have been kind of steps in that process. Part of it is the knowledge and learning the skills and the tools, but it's also from the standpoint of teaching it. I need to know what it is that we're trying to teach, what the exam is that we're trying to teach to. But it's something where I've said in the past that when you start teaching a new topic, there's an amount of time it takes to teach it. And then as you begin to understand that topic more, from experience, and the more you teach it, it takes longer because you have more things to share and you know more about it. But then there's a point when you really truly understand the topic, and then the amount of time it takes to teach it comes down, even less than at the beginning, because you're able to get right to the real heart of the matter in terms of what it is that ultimately we need to know, fundamentally we need to know about the topic. And so that's the process that I like to go through from a learning standpoint in order to make the teaching that much more effective.
Well, that's the most important perspective, I think, for all teachers also out there, that how should they approach the whole process. So at Plutus, when we were about to launch US CMA and I had just come on board, I knew that the only setup that we have to go ahead with is Hock, because I have looked at the material. I am a teacher myself, so my job becomes that much more easier when the material is so lucid and so free flowing. So how did you get to that? I mean, I know it's a journey. It's a journey of 25 years, but to simplify something and make it so accessible. So what made that shift possible from being so theoretical, which most publications are, to having it this way where it's so accessible, even a layman would understand variance analysis from your book?
Well, I think it's kind of the perspective you take. And if you listen outside of a classroom when you're talking to somebody or somebody's talking to you, and they say a lot, and then at the end they say, what this really means is, I think that's where we need to start. What is it that we're trying to do? What is the reason we're talking about variance analysis? What is it we're trying to do? And if we understand at the beginning why this topic is being taught, what the questions are going to be about, why it's important to a business, why this is a decision a business makes. If we keep that end in sight, then the material kind of falls into place because we know exactly why it is that we're doing this. And this is one of the things I say when we're teaching is we need to know why we're doing variance analysis. And now the really rough way of saying we do variance analysis is to find out who we fire or who we hire, who we give a bonus to or who we fire. And so if we keep that in mind, that helps make the material targeted towards that and not to get distracted into other things that aren't really part of what it is that's the crux of the matter that we're teaching.
Wow. And so when I was going through, before the discussion, one often studies as one must. You started off in Miami, Florida, and
Miami of Ohio, actually.
oh, Ohio. Okay.
Different, same Miami, a different state, but yes.
Okay. And your journey has literally taken you all over the world. And US CMA is truly a global certification. So how has your global perspective shaped how you deliver US CMA, not just to partners across, but even in terms of material? How has the global perspective shaped it?
Well, I think one of the things that I like about CMA, and I've been involved with different professional certifications for 30 years, what I like about CMA is that it's very practical. Everything that is on the CMA exam, either the company you work for does or they should do. Maybe they don't, but if they don't, they should. And so the topics that are in CMA are around the world. Every industry, every country, these issues are there. Now, they may be a little bit different in some industries than other industries, and some countries may have slightly different emphasis on things. But wherever you are in the world, you need to know how much it costs you to produce your product or deliver your service. You need to understand how those costs become the price that you set. You need to have a budget. You need to make decisions. And so that language of business, that language of cost, in a sense, that language of setting a price, that's universal. And it can be in Russia, it can be in the United States, it can be in India, it can be in Argentina, whatever country it is. And so from a content standpoint, it's all the same. Whatever place it is that somebody's studying, whatever industry they're in, we're speaking the same language. Now, in terms of doing business in different countries, there are different ways that different countries learn. I know that in India, there's a lot of live taught classes. In the United States right now, for almost any professional certification, I don't think there are any live taught classes. Or if there are, they're very very small and very local. And so different countries have different ways of teaching. They have different student body in terms of, is it mostly experienced professionals? Is it more university students? And so within each country, it's a matter of identifying who the students are, what they are bringing when they start studying, what experience they have, what knowledge they have. And one of the things that we did with our material from the very beginning is our material is a little more complete. We've tried to make it so that if you have done 10 years of budgeting, you will find our budgeting material excessive and boring because you know everything in it. And you'll read it and you'll say, I understand this, I understand this. But if you have 10 years of budgeting experience, it means you don't have 10 years of experience with internal controls or with financial accounting or whatever the case may be. And so in that area that you know very well, our material is too long, too much, and too boring. But all those other parts where you don't have that same experience, you need that background. You need that foundation. One of the things that is important in learning, it's important in our career, and everything we do is the foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation, if you don't have a broad foundation, it's hard to build your career, it's hard to build your exam success. And so we want to make certain that our materials help every candidate understand the foundation of every topic.
Correct.
And so I know, and I remember, I don't know, many years ago, somebody wrote and told us that our economics material was too basic. And we didn't need to cover all of that. Well, it turned out this person had a PhD in economics. Well, I didn't write the economics material for somebody who has a PhD in economics. That economics material is written for somebody who has very little background in economics.
Correct.
And so as long as we provide that foundation, that knowledge at the beginning levels, it's a lot easier for the exam content to be built on top of it.
And see, I'm not a trained teacher. I learned it on the job. But one thing, how indirectly you and your books mentored me, is that every concept has an explanation followed by a question, followed by one more question, which covers literally the entire
Right.
universe. And then there's a question bank. So I realized as I was reading the material that this is how even I have to be in a classroom. So thank you so much for, putting that perspective in my head.
Well, and it's something too that it's all a process. People ask us, what's the shortcut? How can I, study in less time? And there isn't a shortcut. It's learning. Now, the shortcut is if you have 15 years of budgeting experience, you already know the content. But it is something that there's a foundation, there's steps to it. And when candidates try to jump to the end, it doesn't work because, again, it comes back to having that foundation. And a lot of topics, that foundation is why. Why do we do it? And one of the things, ratios, on the CMA exam, I think there's more than 70 ratios that are in the syllabus. Now, you're not going to have 70 ratios on your exam, but those are all formulas that you need to memorize. If we understand why we're calculating this ratio, I think it makes it a lot easier to memorize the formula.
True.
Because you can think, well, if this is what we're trying to measure, well, that's what the ratio needs to be about. And so, to me, there's a lot of memorization that has to take place on any exam. There's formulas, there's definitions, there's steps in a process. But if we understand why and what it is ultimately we're doing this for, why are we doing the ratios? What is the capital budgeting process? Why are we doing it? That makes it so much easier to understand the steps, the formulas, to memorize all of that. One of the things CMA does not teach or does not cover taxation. And if you take an exam that covers taxation from another country, okay, if you're studying for CPA and you're in India, US taxation, well, most likely you're not going to be filing taxes in the US. And so that study process to study taxation of another country, that's just memorization. There's no why, there's no experience, there's no background in that. And so for me, that's the most difficult studying is when you don't have a place to put that content. And it's just this random set of laws that you need to
Correct.
memorize. And so if we're able to lay that foundation in the materials, it makes it so much easier for the students to be able to pull out what they need and answer the exam question.
True, true. And with CMA becoming so popular, and we all know how significant a role you have played in CMA's journey and its popularity and its credibility, all of that. So how do you see the US CMA certification shaping up in India and in other geographies also?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about CMA being practical. And I know that when I talk to students and candidates, one of their concerns is the future. And is AI going to take all the accountants' jobs in the world? And the answer to that is no. But we still need to be aware of what it is that accountants and finance professionals are going to need to do 2 years, 5 years, 10 years in the future. And it really comes down to adding value to the organization you work for. And whether that is in terms of making decisions, providing the information to make decisions, if we are able to add value to the organization we work for, we will have a job for a long time. We'll get promoted, we'll have new opportunities. But that's all based on being able to add value. And the only way we're able to add value is if we know something and are able to apply that to our work, to our company. And what CMA does is it provides that knowledge to the candidates because it's all practical. And when we start our career, we may have a very narrow area. We do accounts receivable, we do accounts payable, we do this type of inventory or this type of fixed assets, whatever the case may be. But as we go up in the organization, that perspective has to broaden. And you look at the CFO, they're all operations of the business. And so what CMA does is it gives candidates the knowledge so that they can apply that to the company they work for. And like I said, every company has to know how much it costs to produce their product or service. Every company has overhead. Some might have more and some might have less overhead, but every company has overhead. Every company has fixed costs and variable costs. And so if we have that foundation and a willingness to learn, this is what a lot of candidates need to develop, is you don't pass the exam and you're done. You have to keep learning. You have to learn how to apply this knowledge to the situation at the company. But if we're able to do that, we're going to be the ones that use AI in the future. It's been said, this wasn't me who coined this, but I like the phrase when we say you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to somebody who knows how to use AI better than you. AI is a tool. And if you don't know how to use the tool, you're not going to have a job for very long. And the comparison I draw, when I graduated university X number of years ago, when I was preparing my resume, I said on my resume that I had spreadsheet and word processing skills because I'd used them. I don't even think it was Word and Excel at that time, Lotus 1, 2, 3 or whatever it was. But I had been exposed to them while I was at university, and not everybody had. So that was my unique selling point as an individual, is that I knew how to use Excel. Well, if you go today and try to find a job and don't know how to use Excel, you're not going to get a job. They're not going to interview you. AI right now is where Excel was when I graduated. It's nice to have it. And I'm familiar with it. I know how to use it a little bit. That's great. 5 years from now, if you don't know how to use the tools, whatever they're named, we don't know what they're going to be, but whatever they're named, if you don't know how to use those tools, you're not going to get a job because those tools are what are required to do the job.
So true. Because this question comes from everyone.
Right.
What about AI? I said AI is a supplementary thing. It's going to make your job easier, as you said, if you know how to handle it. It's not going to take away your job.
Right.
And now I recollected that the first time I saw you, I'm sorry to kind of change track. It was at the IMA conference,
Mm-hmm.
and people said he's here, and I was like, no, he's too big a name. And so I double checked the person on the stage and the picture. Okay, it's the same person. And that is truly a fanboy moment, because you are a legend. And it's so rare to come across someone who has literally created the course as we know it today, because I teach using Hock material and there are so many of them who do
Mm-hmm.
it that way. I think it's for all our listeners also, they will be in for a huge treat, because listening to you and your ideas is something they don't want to miss out on. Which brings me to my next question. And I have been having this idea in my mind for a while that, in India, at least right now, I don't know how it works in other geographies, people like to do multiple qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing a CMA also, they are doing a CPA, and I don't know, the first thing they see, they take it up sometimes to make their CMA journey easier or whatever.
Right.
So, with so many qualifications out there, there's a CPA, there's Indian CMA also.
Right.
So, how does US CMA stand out, or how does US CMA make that pull? Because we are seeing so many people
Right.
gravitating towards that.
Well, I think there are a lot of certifications, and there's more than I've heard of. I mean, every once in a while I come across somebody who has a certification that I hadn't heard of before. And certifications are a great investment, and they're the best investment you can make in your career, but it still needs to be the right certification. Just collecting letters for the sake of collecting letters doesn't really add value. And so I think the way I see CMA is that, well, first we need to recognize that in a person's career, they probably will have more than one certification. And when you're starting your career, you're in the early stages of your career, I think CMA is a very, very good foundational certification. It opens doors in accounting, finance, consulting. If you want to start your own business, it's a great background for that. But it's not a specialist. There are very specific specialty certifications out there. But as we're starting our career, we don't know what specialty we're going to end up in. And so when you're starting your career, you need a foundational certification. CMA is excellent. Great coverage of syllabus. It's practical syllabus. It's 2 exams. It's able to be done in a fairly short period of time. I think sometimes people hear 2 exams and think easy. That's not a connection to make. It is certainly not an easy exam. They could have made those 2 exams into 12 exams very easily. But what it does is it opens doors for accounting, finance, consulting, all kinds of areas. So you get that when you start your career. And then after a few years, your career might start to take a certain direction. And if that direction is in accounting, if that direction is in finance, if that direction is in internal audit, there's a different certification that you need based on what direction your career is going. I'll give an example. I have an older brother who started as a CPA many years ago. And I asked him recently what his certifications were that he had, and he listed 2 that I didn't know. I hadn't heard of them. But when I know what he does professionally now, he's left the Big Four and auditing. When I know what he does and what certifications he has, it makes perfect sense. And so there's no reason to start collecting that specialty certification until you know what it is. And that's may mean that you finish CMA and you work for a little bit. You don't know yet what that next certification needs to be. And so that's the time where we take the knowledge and the skills that we learned, that foundation, and we start translating that to performance. We start translating that to doing the job. And we understand that there's a difference between budgeting on the CMA exam and budgeting in the real world. On the CMA exam, internal politics is not part of the budgeting process.
So true.
In the real world, unfortunately, sometimes there's a little bit of politics involved internally. And so it's taking that knowledge, converting that, transforming that into having the skills to utilize, to implement that knowledge at the organization, to add value to the organization. And then as we start moving up the ladder a little bit, we can see what direction we need to go for that next certification. And so, yes, most professionals will over the course of their career, collect a few certifications. But it's important that we don't just randomly choose a certification. We need to make certain it's a certification that's going to give us the skills and the tools we need for the job that we want to have in the future. One of the things we need to remember about any certification is that choice of certification needs to be based on the job you want to have, not the job you did have, or even really the job you do have. But what is the job you want in the future? What are the skills, the tools, the knowledge that you need to have to do that job you want next? So that when it comes time for that possible promotion, you're able to say, I know how to do that. I've learned. I've got the foundation here. Let me put that into action for the company.
Wow. And after what you said, I think my mind is also opened up. What I'm hearing is you don't need to figure out everything at 21. And this is the path I want to take. As you grow, CMA has given you knowledge of 12 subjects. As you grow, maybe you decide that something else is also going to make sense, and it doesn't have to happen at 21 when you finish it.
I mean, the good thing is you're absolutely right. I know we want to finish everything up when we're 21, but if we finished everything up when we were 21, we'd be bored
True.
when we were older. And so it's a process, and it's something. Learning is something that's going to take your whole life. You need to keep doing it your whole life. Even if we just think now about AI and the tools we need to learn with AI, 3 years ago, nobody knew about them. Okay, they existed, they were close to being developed, but the general population wasn't aware that this was going to happen. And that was 3 years ago. And so it's possible that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, there's going to be another development, another step, something's going to be developed that we haven't thought of yet.
True.
And we need to be ready for that. And part of that is being open. We need to be open that what we've learned today isn't going to be everything we need to know for the rest of our career. We need to keep learning as we go.
And I think today the first thing that you mentioned was learning and how you are still continuing to learn. And I think that is so inspiring because you and US CMA could be synonyms for most of us. And yet, your quest to know more, your quest to constantly, you could possibly do without knowing AI, I think, but you still want to learn it. And I think that's something which has inspired me, and I'm sure it will inspire countless others also.
Well, I think one of the things that I encourage everybody to do is to read. And years ago, there was the phrase, readers are leaders. And I know that today we don't have to only read, we can watch, we can listen, and there's podcasts and audio books and all that. But it's something where we need to be aware of what's going on around us in the world. And so when I say reading, it isn't only reading business books and finance books. It's reading history. It's reading about other countries. It's reading about other cultures, other religions, other geographies. Because all of that, it's a small world these days. And travel and business and your company's competitor might be halfway around the world. Or it might become halfway around the world. It doesn't exist yet, but it will exist halfway around the world. And so it's being curious. It's being open-minded to learn more things, not only about accounting and finance and business, but all of those things that shape the world that we're in today. And so a little bit of time every day, read something, watch something, listen to something that's new. I know it's something that I don't do this as much, but one of my children does. You can go into Wikipedia and ask for a random page. So every day, go into Wikipedia, ask for a random page, and read about that. Spend 3 minutes and reading about something you didn't know existed, didn't know was out there. And just that curiosity and wanting to learn and being open-minded is really going to help anybody in their career. Absolutely.
Again, I'm just picking on words. You said the word curious. And I think that is an ability the current generation and part of my generation also has lost because of, constantly scrolling. And there's a new word I have learned as a part of learning. I read this word called brain rot, where, all these youngsters, they just keep on browsing things and they have lost the ability to read and understand things on their own. But what you said, I think, opens up that window. You should read something, watch something, listen to something, and that's probably going to make all
Yeah.
the difference.
Yep. Just be curious. You know,
I
ask
think I
those,
have.
and even if you just think about all the people you come across in your life, people at work, people you live near, everyone has a different story. I travel, I sit in the airport, I sit in the hotel, and people, why are they here? Everybody has a unique story. And so be curious to learn the things that are out there in the world. And that, when the last time that I was in India, we had a lot of meetings with CFOs and we did some CFO roundtables. And one of the messages that came through all the time from the CFOs was they wanted people who want to learn. How does this work? What's next? How does this apply to all those types of wanting to learn types of questions? And so developing that kind of, I don't know if we have a curiosity muscle, but developing that curiosity and wanting to ask and understand, that's broadens your horizons. It makes you a much more enjoyable person to sit at the dinner table if you have that knowledge, but it's also part of what's going to help in your career to differentiate yourself as being somebody who is open and learning and wants to learn.
And with, as you said at one of the points today, that it's it's a degree, it's a qualification, a certification. But having that and putting it on the wall is not, it's not an ATM machine, right? It's not going to generate
Yeah.
cash for you. So you have to be able to apply that, to think in the right direction. And students often ask, because we do counseling calls, we have mentorship sessions, what kind of a job will I get?
Yeah.
Is question one. And there's another one, but I don't even know whether it is the right question. So I'll just stop with the first one.
Well, what's the second one?
So second question is, sir, how much money will I make?
Okay.
And I often say it depends on how well you apply what you
Right.
learn. But I would want to hear your thoughts on both.
Well, one of the questions we get is, if I pass this exam, will I get a job? Which is a similar question to how much money will I make? And I'll start by answering that question. That's the wrong question. Getting a job is not our objective. What is our objective is keeping a job and getting promoted. And so, as you said, you pass your exam, you get a certificate, you put it on the wall. Having a certificate or 10 certificates or a fancy university degree, that might get you the interview and it might get you the job, but it won't help you keep the job if it's simply a certificate on the wall. If we can take that knowledge that we learned and use it and apply it and add value to the company that we work for, that's how we will keep our job. And so if somebody has every professional certification, Indian CA, Indian CMA, CS, CPA, all of them, but they show up at work on the first day and they're late, and they're not able to do anything, they can't use the tools, they're not going to keep a job for very long, no matter how many certifications they have on the wall. But if we come in with knowledge that we know and the ability to apply that knowledge and impact the company we're working for, whether we have no certifications, one certification, we will keep our job, we will be promoted, and we will make a lot of money. In terms of the question of how much money will I make, I know it's easier for me to say this when I'm not 22 years old trying to get my first job and currently don't have a job. But for a large extent, the amount of money that you make in your first job doesn't matter.
I agree.
You need a job. You need to have experience. You need to show that you can do something. So if that first job you're offered is less than you wanted it to be, less than what your friend got at a different job, doesn't matter. If you start working and you do your job well, that will not be your salary for very long, because that company will promote you, or somebody will find out that you're doing very well and another company will hire you to make a lot more. And so I know it's a lot easier for me sitting at this stage of my career than at the first stages of my career to say this, but in that first job, that extra 5%, 10%, 20% of salary isn't important. You want to find a job that gives you the opportunity to work, that gives you the opportunity to do something, to take the knowledge that you have and apply it, so that you can demonstrate to this employer, to everyone else in the future, that you are able to add value to the organization. And if you think about how much that first salary is, and if you lose 20% of that, but you put yourself in a great situation, a good company that's going to promote you, that's going to allow you to grow, that 20% that you lose at the beginning is going to be 1% of your salary in 5 years. And when you get that raise in 5 years, that's a 10% raise instead of a 5% raise. That 5% of a much bigger number is a lot larger than the 20% of that salary you were making your first day on the job. And so it's perspective. We need to have perspective that our career is a long time. It's not, we don't have all the answers when we're 21, and we don't have all the salary when we're 21. Put yourself in a position to learn, to be in a company that will invest in you, to help you learn, to give you opportunities, to give you the ability to demonstrate what it is that you know. And that's the company that in the long run is going to lead to a much larger total compensation than trying to get into a position that maybe pays a little bit more at the beginning, but maybe they know they have to pay more because they don't treat people very well and everybody leaves. You need to think a little more long term than simply your highest salary at the beginning.
I think the word I am taking with me is impact. You leave that impact in a way that this is the job, get Satyamedha and no one else. I think that is the definition of becoming successful, as the way you put it. And I think you will not have all the answers at 22, not at 32. I mean, I don't have half of them, more than half of them. So,
well, one of the things that we never have all the answers. And as we get older and learn more and hopefully wiser, you begin to realize that you have even fewer of the answers than you thought you had. Because there's just, I mean, I like to read, but I know that I could read 24 hours a day, every day of the year, and I would lose. There's more good books to read than I can read. There's more knowledge out there. There's more information out there. And so we realize that it's an uphill climb and we're never going to get to the top. We never have all of the answers, but that's what makes it exciting.
Definitely, I think if you figure everything out, then there's nothing left to do at the end of it.
Yeah.
I have just 2 questions for you because I know you are busy
Sure.
and there are 100 things that you have to do. But my personal curiosity, this was not a part of the list that we had prepared.
That's okay.
How do you see India contributing to the US CMA certification and the certification contributing to India that way?
Well, I think the certification contributes to India in the same way it does in other countries as a passport of knowledge. One of the things that is we move different geographies, even within India, but outside of India. The university we attended means less and less. And for example, I went to Miami University. There's a University of Miami that's in the state of Florida. I went to Miami University in Ohio. Different states, different climates. When I went to university, my university was the number 5 accounting program in the country. And so my university accounting education is top notch. There's very few people that have a better university accounting education than I do. But when I come to India and I say I went to Miami University, people have me in a different state.
I did.
A different university than I attended.
Yes.
And so nobody here has ever heard of my university. And therefore they have no idea how good my accounting education is. And so if I were to apply for a job here and I say, I have an accounting degree from Miami University, the person would look at me and say, oh, well, I guess congratulations, good job. But it doesn't mean anything because nobody knows what I learned or the quality of the education. When I say I'm also a CMA, now people know. There's a syllabus. and Brian passed the syllabus. And so whether Brian passed that exam in Miami of Ohio, Miami of Florida, India, Russia, Argentina, whatever country, city in the world, it's the same exam with the same syllabus, and I passed it. And so what that certification provides, what CMA provides here is that knowledge, this standardized certification. This is what this person knows, whether they went to the best university in India, the not best university in it, doesn't matter.
True.
If they passed CMA, somehow they learned this, whether it's university, work experience, self-study, whatever the case may be, they have this knowledge. In terms of what India contributes to the world of certification and the world of CMA is, I think it's a different perspective. In India, there are more candidates at the university level studying for CMA than there are in the US. And so I think that it's kind of opening up, I don't know if different possibilities is quite the right word, but a different perspective as to the role that the certification can have in the education process. I greatly enjoy coming to India and talking to the students and meeting the students and hearing how this is something that it's a definite impact. And this is, I mean, I like the job that I have because I know it creates a very positive impact for a lot of people. And I like seeing that. It's education, it's a international education, it's around the world known and accepted. And so I think that there's a lot of kind of a good symbiosis between the certification and India.
Yes. And my final question. You have achieved everything that most of us would not even dream of. You are at the pinnacle, and yet you are driven. Yet you are doing so many activities that somebody in your position could very well rest on his laurels and say, okay, I've done it all. I don't need to do anything. So, what pushes you and what's next for you?
Well, I think what pushes me is I enjoy it. It's something that I enjoy. One of the things is that when you're involved in certifications, you're constantly working with new people because people study and then they pass and there's new people coming in. I enjoy it. It's something that it changes. They change the exams. They change the syllabus. And when I look back on when I've been, the 25 years that I've been teaching CMA, the syllabus has changed. Economics was in it for a little while. Strategic marketing was in it for a little while. They had a lot more financial accounting in it. And so there's topics that have come and gone. And that reflects what is happening in the business world and what it is that finance and accounting professionals are expected to do. And so part of it is I enjoy doing it. I'd like to think that, I know there is no such thing as perfect material, but I'd like to think that we can keep making it better. And so there's a little bit of a continuous improvement to make it a little bit better, a little bit more effective, to help people pass the exams. And in terms of what's next, more certifications. This is something that we've announced a little bit and we'll be talking more about. But what's next is just trying to reach more people. I know that more years ago now, the number of years keeps increasing. But I kind of had a shift in my thinking in terms of my measure of success. And I shifted from revenue to number of students. And the measure that I have is how many people do we help pass their exams. And if that's what we focus on, that's what continues to lead to good materials and a good process, because that ultimately is our goal, is to help as many people as we can pass the exams that they've chosen to study.
Wow. You certainly helped me because when I cleared my CMA exam, some of my colleagues had come home and so they found a copy of the Hock material that I was using to prepare and they wrote nice messages on the book. So I've kept that as, a memory. Yeah. And thank you so much for, gracing us with your presence
today. It's my pleasure.
I got to know so much and how far I have to go and yet keep going. Because looking at you, I think that is the one inspiration, the one thing that I'm taking away from today's conversation. Thank you so much again
Oh,
on
thank
behalf
you.
of Plutus Education.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.